Dalton Schultz signs with the Texans this offseason. 1 year, $9 million contract. A lot of people projected him to garner a lot more than that. It could be a real good find for the Texans. Maybe a long-term solution at tight end, but we're going to hear from him today. I want to hear from D'Amico Ryans first because he had nice things to say about Dalton Schultz. So I'm Seth Payne. Played for the Texans for 5 years, played in the NFL for 10 years. I've got a morning sports radio show in Houston. If you like NFL content, please hit the like and subscribe button. Here's D'Amico on Dalton Schultz.
Dalton, what I like about Dalton's game is he's not just a one-trick guy. Like, Dalton does a good job in the blocking game. He also has great hands. He's always open, right? He's a big target. He's very quarterback friendly. So it's one thing playing against, going against Dalton a lot there in the NFC. He made a lot of big plays. So I'm excited to see what he can do for us here.
D'Amico there saying that he's good at blocking. He's always open, which I think in two regards, that's true. As far as Dalton Schultz always being open, he's not lightning fast or anything, but kind of in a less dramatic fashion than DeAndre Hopkins. He's going to catch the ball whether he's open or not. I think quarterbacks, and especially Dak Prescott, felt good that as long as they placed the ball well, he didn't have to be wide open, that Dalton Schultz, through body positioning, strength, and good hands, was going to come up with the ball. The other big thing about it is that, like a lot of tight ends in the Kubshanistani system, they are really good at reading coverages and really understanding where the soft spots in the zone are going to be. And that's a little bit like a sixth sense for tight ends. It's not so easy to measure, so the scouts can't even necessarily recognize it. So the scouts don't like it, but the coaches can see it and the coaches know. I think that's what Bobby Slowick probably sees in Dalton Schultz. The pass blocking could be better, but I think what the Texans saw in Dalton Schultz from a blocking standpoint was his willingness to get after it downfield. Offenses like this want to lead the league in big runs. Going back to Alex Gibbs, that was one of the hallmarks, the offensive line coach who coached with the Texans for a little while. You want to lead the league in big runs. How do you get that? You get that by wide receivers and tight ends blocking downfield. And we see that Dalton Schultz is very eager to do that. Oh, and one other thing about always being open, I think one part of that too is that you have an ability to hold on to the ball while Jalen Petrie is trying to scoop your liver out with his elbow. Very tough dude, this Dalton Schultz, even though he went to Stanford. We'll get into more of that later. Here's Dalton Schultz as he showed up at his first press conference yesterday.
It's good to see some people. Like the last 2 years, it hasn't really been a whole lot of people in the room.
I was surprised by this. Were they super strict in Dallas for like the last 2 years post-COVID? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, like, I'm just grateful that.
Oh, he was asked about his decision to come here from Dallas and become a Texan.
Have an opportunity to play, going into year 6. Obviously, D'Amico coming in, he's been the D coordinator that's, kicked us out of the playoffs kicked me out of the playoffs the last couple of years. And so it's like, having a defensive-minded head coach with a scheme that I truly have respect for and believe in, and then, also just the scheme coming over from SF, like, an offense that, I've got some familiarity with in my past, and, obviously everybody's kind of seen what they've been able to do in San Francisco, and so, having opportunities like to do the same thing here has been, very intriguing for me at the tight end position especially.
He talks about him having some experience with this offense. And I think that at least part of that is Mike McCarthy, even though he wasn't calling plays, even though it was Kellen Moore's offense, Mike McCarthy's got a West Coast background, which is not necessarily the same as a Kubiak Shanahan system, but they're all rooted in the West Coast. So the terminology, the concept of flooding the shorter routes to open up stuff downfield, all of that, there's some similarities there. I don't want to go into a long history of the West Coast offense and how it was actually invented by Bill Walsh in Cincinnati, which isn't on the West Coast of anything. It's not even on the West Coast of the river that it's on. Not the city, not the stadium, anything. But long story short, it's got the rootings in Bill Walsh. So there's some similarities there to some things he's already familiar with. If you want to make the easy comparison that you jump to is, okay, Owen Daniels, George Kittle, guys that were mid-round draft picks that got way more production than people expected coming out of college. I think Dalton Schultz looks at that and thinks, okay, I can be that next guy. And I'm sure that's what they sold him. So good job to D'Amico. Good job to Bobby Slowick. Whatever they did to tell him that, maybe compared to other offers they might have had, this might be the best position for Dalton Schultz to really highlight and stack up some stats. And maybe the Texans re-sign him, maybe they don't, but it could be a good year for him. Then he was asked, what are your first impressions on CJ Stroud?
CJ's he's bright, man. He's kind of his attitude and demeanor kind of almost understated sometimes. He walks through pretty humble, like head down, soft voice. But I mean, you can just you start to interact with him. I mean, the kid just oozes confidence, man. Like, obviously everybody's familiar with what he did at Ohio State. I mean, the kid's a baller. He throws a nice ball, and I mean, so far as he's been soaking up everything he can from all the offensive coaches in the room. So I think the kid's got a bright future ahead of him.
That jives with everything else that we've heard from people within the Texans. Of course, the pre-draft chatter from anonymous scouts and whatnot. I do find it really interesting in that CJ seems to have a polarizing personality without being a guy that's like all that extroverted or anything. I think some guys look at him and it just doesn't match the persona of what a quarterback is or should be in their eyes. One of the quotes from this spring by Bob McGinn in the Go Long newsletter, an anonymous scout, who said that Stroud's, quote, calm and mellow and laid back playing style concerns him. That was my concern with him, the scout said. His personality is just sort of calm and mellow and laid back. And that's the way he plays. Yeah, because calm and mellow could never work out in this West Coast Bill Walsh-inspired offense that we were just talking about. Calm and mellow just doesn't cut it. Not in the NFL, buddy. Not everybody has to be a psychotic control freak like Peyton Manning or Tom Brady. My God. So then he was asked on the transition of the team and the coaching staff from what he saw last year when he matched up against them, Cowboys playing the Texans almost prevailing.
I mean, going into that, I think, it's easy in the league to kind of underestimate guys and underestimate teams, especially you look at records. But, every record in the league, any team can beat any team on any given Sunday. I know it's cliche, but, the margins of winning and losing in this league are so slim. And I think even looking back last year, especially leaving that game, I just remember thinking damn, they got a really good young core. Especially I think the back end of the secondary kind of impressed me playing against them, all the time. And so, just knowing that you're coming into a young team who's hungry, who's got a lot of, young guys on rookie deals, hungry to prove themselves, I think is very, attractive and picking where you want to play. And obviously, actually getting in the building, you start to see that there's actually a strong, veteran presence here as well. There's a lot of good leaders, especially on that defense. And I think, hearing some of those voices in these first couple months has been great. And honestly, it feels good to be in a place that, I feel very hungry coming to work, being around guys, that are that motivated to get better on a day-by-day basis.
I think there's a few things here. One was just him talking about the veteran leadership, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Jerry Hughes is 35 years old. He's been doing it in the league for a long time. Jimmy Ward knows this defense. He's a vocal guy. Sheldon Rankins, who we really haven't talked a whole lot about. I should probably do a video on Sheldon Rankins. Christian Kirksey was a guy who was brought in specifically because I think he does things the right way, and they want younger guys to see that. And the other thing, too, is the composition of the team, the way they've handled free agency. We've talked about this a bunch. A lot of one-year deals, 2-year deals max. And what does that do? That keeps guys hungry. That keeps guys from being complacent. That creates an environment where guys are either rookies, young guys trying to prove themselves, or guys who are veterans but on 1- and 2-year deals and very much still trying to fight and scratch and claw to stay in the league. So that I've been all in on that strategy. It's not an all-out 100% tank. He was asked about Damian Pierce, and his answer is the reason. I'll retract some of my criticism for some of the people asking questions yesterday because I think they based it on some really nice things Dalton Schultz says about Damian Pierce.
Man, dude, that kid can run hard. I remember coming out of the game last year, I'm like, damn, who the hell is this 31 kid? He's just gashing us. Dude, he's a great player. He's full energy, ball energy. He's one of the. I mean, I had to ask him. I'm like, what year is this for you? because like he carries himself like a vet, you know what I mean? And so, you know, it's just listening to a kid that's been here, you know, he's a second-year lead guy, you know, kind of surprised me a bit because he definitely gives off that kind of veteran, you know, established leadership style. And so, you know, having him kind of, you know, be at the head of the running back room, I think is big time going forward.
Look, I felt like they were asking Damian Pierce too many questions about leadership yesterday. And then some of you guys in the comments and some of our listeners today pushed back against me a little bit on that. And I have to agree with those people who pushed back. I think Damian Pierce, based on some of the things he said like this yesterday, this was a really good little nugget from him on his advice to CJ Stroud. This is Damian Pierce's advice to CJ Stroud.
The only thing I tell him every time I'm on the field with him, bro, command the huddle, bro. Don't be scared. Don't be shy. Don't shy away from that leadership role. You know, you got guys on this team who are behind you and who will help you in that aspect, and we're here to lift you up. So you go out there and make a mistake, you know that you got solid ground to fall back on, and we're going to help you through it.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And it's important for CJ to understand that, you know, he can start to assert himself as a leader, especially when there's a difference between being a leader in the huddle and a guy who calls the entire team up to tell them what's up and that they got to work harder. You know, like the first part, that's a requirement of the job, is being a leader in the huddle. The second part, being a leader in the locker room and on the team as a whole, that does take a little bit more time. But when it comes to actually like commanding your specific job, that's very immediate. And it's good that he's got like guys like Damian Pierce showing a lot of veteran leadership as a second-year guy in his ear like that. Okay, back to Dalton Schultz. He was asked on what it would take for this team, the Texans, to sign you long-term. He's on a one-year deal, remember?
I mean, to be honest, like, I don't really care about that stuff right now. Just putting it first and foremost, like I said, coming into this, like, I'm just happy that I can play for another year. Whether that's on a 1 year, a 4 year, a 10 year, whatever it is, like, I'm excited that I got an opportunity to take another shot at, you know, making a deep playoff run and ultimately winning a Super Bowl. And I think that's kind of what I'm most focused on. All that other stuff, like, I handle that, you know, I leave that to my agent. I just let him kind of dictate, you know, whatever he says, I kind of go with. So.
Okay, one thing I hadn't caught the first time around was him just kind of casually mentioning making a deep playoff run and ultimately winning a Super Bowl. I'm here for that. I like you, Dalton Schultz. I'll credit you with that if the Texans make a Cinderella run this year and are pushing that hard at the end of the season. I'll credit Dalton Schultz as the first guy that had the gonads to say it out loud. So good for you, at least from the team. I know a lot of Texans fans will say that every single year for the rest of the team's existence, no matter how good or bad they are in any given year. But the contracts, they are genuinely better off being thought about not too long or too hard. It's that old philosophy of not pursuing the things that you desire. I'll give you a quote. The most exquisite paradox. As soon as you give it all up, you can have it all. As long as you want power, you can't have it. The minute you don't want power, you'll have more than you ever dreamed possible. That was either Ram Dass or Aaron Rodgers. Not quite sure. Pretty sure it was Ram Dass. Ram Dass, though, I think he's talking about a different type of power. But look, we're going to take that Eastern philosophy and bastardize it into something that we can use for profit, damn it. Why else the motivational poster companies exist if not for that? Now he was asked about some things he saw last year that were already implemented here before he signed with the Texans.
I mean, first and foremost, like, just the coaching staff. Like, you get guys like D'Amico and bringing in a scheme from, like I said, SF, like, proven scheme. You know, all those guys from the Shanahan tree are just, you know, offensively, in my eyes, are really, really good football like scheme designers. So I mean, the coaching staff's a big thing, and then, you know, taking a visit, doing the physical part here, having a chance to meet the strength staff, having a chance to meet the nutrition staff, like everybody in the PT room, the return to play guys, like top to bottom, like they've assembled a staff that, I mean, is top notch. So I think, that felt very comfortable, especially when I first came here, of like, feeling that, okay, this is a place that's been set up with people around that are fully committed to helping their players, from anything from recovery, nutrition to strength training. So I think once I found that, they had everybody in place to kind of handle all the non-football, on the field stuff, like, that just made the decision easy for me.
That is one thing I think the Texans have done a good job of spending on areas of player development. That's one area where I think they've tried to emulate teams like the Astros, is that you're only going to get so much of an edge in scouting and things like that, or trading for players or what have you. The player development side of things, it's just wide open. And there's so many ways that the NFL has kind of been a late adopter to some of the technological things. I think you can gain an advantage there. And I think they're trying to do that. And then the nutrition side of things, yes. He was asked what he has seen from quarterback Davis Mills since seeing him at Stanford. Remember, there's 3 Stanford guys on the team now.
Dude, it's tough because, like, I didn't have I before here, I don't think I had a pass from him, like, ever. Because as soon as he came in, like, he tore his ACL, like he was basically redshirting, medical redshirt, so they had him on the side. Like, I don't even think, going through in the training room, he threw me a ball. Like, and so I think, it's hard to say, like, just how much he's grown. But obviously you have to grow a whole lot coming in from your freshman year at a place like Stanford to the league. So, I'm excited for him. It's great to have another Stanford boy in here, him and Book both. But, yeah, I think it's one of those things where you can kind of reminisce a little bit about the good old days. But it's nice having another guy like him here.
I don't know, another guy like him. 3 Stanford guys might be too much. You're getting a little too nerdy. And I know you're going to say, Seth, didn't you go to a nerdy school? Like, yeah, I went to a relatively nerdy school. But we also, we had an ag school. We kept it real, okay? These fancy lads at Stanford or Harvard or whatnot, they don't even know what manure smells like. They'd have to talk to their servants and find out what manure smells like, if they actually even know the names of their servants. So now I think 2 Stanford guys at max, and we could dice it out later which 2 of those guys will be. The third guy is Thomas Booker. Did I mention that? For those of you who don't remember the defensive line draft pick from last year. Final question. He was asked if he thinks quarterback Davis Mills can still play in the league.
Dude, everybody on this team can play in the league. Like, point blank, period. Thanks.
Dude, he got a little spicy there. I like it. He took up for his buddies for the Stanford crew there.
Dude, everybody on this team can play in the league. Like, point blank, period. Thanks.
Exactly. He looked down at the mic to see if he could pick it up and drop it and walk out on a mic drop, which looks cool, but they're very expensive. This thing, my God. Take that for data. That's what I say. Good job, Dalton Schultz. I'm psyched about him. I think that he's going to be awesome. I think it's going to be really, really good for CJ Stroud to have him. One little hypocrisy that was pointed out to me. I've argued that DeAndre Hopkins might be too much of a security blanket for CJ Stroud, the way I think in some ways he was too much of a security blanket for Deshaun Watson. Somebody this morning, as I was talking about Dalton Schultz being a good security blanket for a quarterback, called me out on my hypocrisy. I have to fess to it. You're right. Is a security blanket really an awful, awful thing for a young quarterback to have? It's not until it is. That's the problem. And it's not as long as it doesn't cost too much. So I think Dalton Schultz is the right blend of not costing too much and not being so good at what he does that CJ Stroud's going to end up lasered in on him the way Deshaun was lasered in on DeAndre Hopkins for a long time. Real quick story about security blankets. I had one branch of my family, my cousins, who are like, these guys are pretty hardcore. Like, you'd be amazed. You'd be surprised they weren't Amish if you couldn't see them and you just heard about how hard they worked. But when they had a blankie at a certain age, and it was a pretty young age, their mom on their birthday would take them out to the burn barrel and throw the blankie in the burn barrel, and the kid would watch it go up in flames. Yeah, crazy. They're badasses. But I would suggest against. I still don't, and they know this. I object to the burning of the blankies. I had my blankie until I was 48. Did just fine.